Pretty.
Okay, welcome. I'm so excited today to have a conversation with Michael Allison. Michael is a health and performance coach, and I find it, I'm so excited because, I've took the Play Zone certification a while ago, and that's where Michael has partnered up with the Polyvagal Institute and Dr. Stephen Porges to bring the Polyvagal Theory into performance and coaching and a way, or in addition to therapy and the trauma world. So I'm super excited about this. And Michael, thank you so much for bringing us a language that is about being a human in every day, not even just in a high performance, competition, but being a human, to a very simple language. And we'll talk about that and more.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I look forward to seeing where we go. And you hit it. It isn't, to me, polyvagal theory is much more than just a therapeutic approach or the underpinnings to what's going on in healing. Mm-hmm. To me, when I first discovered Porges's work, it just made sense that it's a wellness. To me, it's a template for wellness, because the beauty of what he talks about with neuroception, this subconscious detection system, is yes, we detect threat, but beautifully we detect safety, and we detect warmth and welcome from another. And that, to me, is the recipe for wellness. So it was just, it made so much sense. Like, yes, this is the pathway to wellness. And performance is broadly, it's not just performance on our stage or in our craft, it's life performance. Mm-hmm. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. So let me ask you, how did those two things come together? Was, you've been a coach for how many years, for so long?
Yeah. So
how
I have
Play Zone come to life?
How did it come to life? So I have owned a wellness and fitness training center in Santa Barbara, California since 1999. Mm. So we're coming up on 24 years. And I started moving more in the direction of what you would consider sort of holistic health, or and then I kind of dabbled into behavior science and habit change and all of that. And that steered me into really recognizing that the really big habits, those patterns that we're kind of locked into, that really we either know aren't helping us, mm-hmm. or that we know if we could change that pattern would really help us move into who we really want to be. Mm-hmm. I wasn't able to sort of help fix that, or fixing is not the right word. I wasn't able to help interrupt that and repattern a new pattern through standard behavior science and all of that. And so that's what led me into polyvagal theory. And looking through that lens, it shifted the way I approached habit change, or shifted the way I approached fitness. And it became more looking at, is what we're currently doing, is that bringing more safety and connection in our physiology, or is it interrupting? And it's not that we always want to just bring safety and connection, but we want to, if we're someone who's really locked in a highly mobilized threat response already, is adding more challenge necessarily where I want to start? And my answer is no. I want to actually help meeting the body where it is, and then what could I do to help bring in more safety and connection, bringing more baseline homeostasis. And then once we find that, then maybe adding challenge. So I started just kind of taking Dr. Porges's work and kind of peppering it through what I was doing with clients, mm-hmm. Just without necessarily really teaching them the core principles of theory, more just sort of working it in a more nuanced way. And then that sort of led me into working with one specific client who was making a comeback in golf. He was a high-level golfer, but older. So he was kind of making a comeback into a high amateur series. And I started working with him, and that was all about him preparing his physiology for the demands of the golf game, which really came down to how he was handling the pressure, right? How he was handling those big moments and recognizing how those big moments were shifting his physiology, which were changing his heart rate, his breathing, his muscle tension, his execution. And what can we do about that? And that led me, he connected me with someone else, and I was doing work with her, and she's like, hey, you need to meet my best friend. And I started working with the best friend, and the best friend's like, hey, you need to do this with my boyfriend. I'm like, who's your boyfriend? Well, he's a professional tennis player. Oh, so I started working with this professional tennis player, and I needed to really morph this into a language and some strategies that didn't require this tennis player in particular to have to learn a new language or to have to develop a new understanding. And so that's sort of how it all evolved, is it was kind of peppered through with clients, and then it kind of led to this, and then it just turned into a whole different and a much bigger play.
When I smile when you talk about language, because I do say that, Polyvagal has its own language that I wish everyone could speak. But when you present it, it's because I know the polyvagal theory, and so it's like, yeah, that's what you mean. So if you could take us and the listeners to, as a simple kind of, you could describe it, and then if it would be helpful if you give it as a life example of what you call the play zone, or the hierarchy of performance, which is kind of parallel the hierarchy in the polyvagal, but we could maybe try to drop that.
We'll drop it down. So let's take a step back, and we'll actually sort of summarize polyvagal theory, and then I'll apply it into the play zone. So the way I see polyvagal theory, which I already kind of touched on, is it's a map. It's a map that helps us really understand how our physiology is subconsciously, reflexively, adaptively responding to the environment. And that environment is what's going on around us, all the sensory information. That environment is internally. Am I in pain? Am I sick? Right? Do I have to go to the bathroom? Muscle tension. And then it's also really importantly, reading the interaction, that relational environment. And it's taking in all of that information, and the nervous system is triggering these reflexive shifts that we can become aware of, but most of the time we're not, right? And those shifts in our physiology, they influence how we experience the world. They bias how we interact with others. They change, for better or for worse, how we feel about ourselves, right? So that to me is the essence of polyvagal theory. And the second real key to that is that not only do we respond to the threat and the risk and the uncertainty and the danger and the evaluation and all of that that's coming at us in daily life and on the stage if we're performing, or at work, or in a relationship, but at the same time, we respond to the warmth and the welcome and the safety and the security and the reliability and the grounding and the comfort. And that can bring us back into a physiological state that supports how we want to act, supports our intentions, our values, our goals, and how we want to interact in our most important relationships. So to me, that's what the theory gives me, that framework. The play zone was it's a phrase that I came up with listening to Dr. Porges talk a lot about play, right? And the way he talked about social play, there's this social interaction, there's reciprocity, there's synchronicity, there's a giving and a receiving. And to me, that's what's going on at the highest level of performance. So when we're actually performing whatever it is, whether it's playing a sport, whether it's running a meeting, whether it's doing a Zoom interaction, play is when we're going back and forth, when there's reciprocity, when there's synchronicity, right? When underneath all of that is a physiology that feels grounded and safe and connected, while at the same time is engaged, is mobilizing. There's some energy.
Yeah.
And so that's what the play zone is.
Yeah, that's basically everyday life. That's when we are, talking with a friend. There's this, reciprocity. There's this engagement when we are presenting something. It's talking to with our kids.
Totally. Yes.
It's about everything. And I think. Yeah, one of the things that maybe I'm kind of jumping is that and we could go back to the examples, is that when we are in a state of safety and we're good, and I call it like I feel that I am myself. I think I know all the things that I need to know. I know how I should be, how I'd like to respond. I know all the information. I know all the things that I need to know. Mm-hmm. Yet when things come into with a high stress, whether it is having a difficult conversation, or wanting to have that kind of calm state when I'm talking to my kids about something difficult or presenting or doing any of that, that is sometimes completely gone. And it's like, where did all that, idea of what I can do, where did it go?
Where did it go? So you're bringing up a couple of really good points. So the first thing that you're really flagging there is that how you're acting or interacting in that relationship doesn't actually match your intentions. Exactly. And that's really important to know for ourselves, but also when we see others reacting in ways that we just can't believe or we think is unacceptable.
We could never do that.
Right. We can see that, wow, that is just, for me, that's information that they are not feeling safe and connected in that moment for whatever reason. And so for myself, it would be the same. For whatever reason, right now, I don't feel really safe enough in this interaction. And so the fact that you're not able to really see the clear picture or to say the quote right things when you're in that physiological state absolutely makes sense, because the regulatory centers in the brainstem at that point. So I look at as an inverted triangle, as a funnel. And if the brainstem circuits are saying, I'm under threat, again, for whatever reason, you don't have access to the highest functions of the brain. You don't have your creativity. You don't see what might be the clear solution. It impacts all of that. So of course, I'm not in a physiological state that supports actually articulating what it is that I know, or even the heartfelt sense that I have for you, I can't express right now. So what do? I mean, what I'm saying that we try to do is we try to help build a lifestyle that has practices, that has relationships, that has activities, that has places we go that help feed and nourish our nervous system in a baseline of safety, so that we actually know what it feels like to feel like what you first described, when you actually feel at ease and calm, or feel playful and joyful. Like, first is how does that feel? And what are the portals into that? What are the activities or the relationships or inner strategies that help me get there, so that I can enter the interaction already kind of in that place? So that would be my first idea. Yeah. And then as we realize we're sort of losing it, having strategies that help us try to regain some of that calming vagal control, try to regain some self-care. But it's not always going to work, because we are human, right? We are human. We will lose it from time to time. Even I do. And this is my day-to-day life. This is what I do. And I lose it. We're human. So, but the key thing that it's had for me in my own life is when I do lose it, I don't lose it as badly. Yes. I regroup more quickly. and I relate to how I lose it in a different way. So I'm relating to my own, quote, failures or missteps or misalignments, right? My mismatches, my body and what my intentions are. I relate to that differently. I can relate to that without shame or blame or guilt or that fault. I can just come back to what it really is and then regroup and then hopefully repair.
Yeah. Just as you're saying that, I feel like, and that's my experience every time when I even talk or listen about it, is that's ease of, I'm not a bad person. It's not because I have no self-control, because that's where we usually jump to in those stress time. And we live in a culture, I think everywhere, of looking at people who fall under stress as weak, as they can't control themselves, as all the things, and the person itself telling them like, oh my goodness, I failed, and that is because I am. And when it comes to the autonomic nervous system and the change in physiology that really shifts us to places that we don't always want to go to, it's like, oh, okay, so and that's where I feel really the compassion sits in, is like, oh, okay. So this is what it is all about. It's not because I can think all the good thoughts and know all the good things.
Yes.
But if the physiology, and just want to clarify when we talk about physiology, what are we talking about? Because we're assuming people understand what that is.
So what I'm talking about when I say physiology, I'm talking about how the autonomic nervous system is regulating all of the components or the attributes of our body. So like our breathing, our heart rate, our blood pressure, our muscle tension, how much we're perspiring, right? How all of our organs are actually operating, our digestive system or inflammation system. So I'm I'm calling physiology how the autonomic nervous system is regulating all of the internal organs and all of the bodily systems. That's what I'm calling physiology. And that is autonomically, right? It's being subconsciously regulated. And there are some attributes of that we can regain control of.
Yes.
Right.
Isn't that the good part of the story?
Right. Thank goodness. Right. So like, again, that doesn't mean we failed because we didn't regain enough sense of connection and safety in those moments when we lose it. But it means that we have a pathway back to enough safety connection so that we can repair.
Yeah. Right. And that's what you present as the container of safety. Right?
Yeah. So the container of safety is building those resources. It's those resources that you have, whether it's an inner resource such as changing your breathing or adjusting your posture, right? Or softening the muscles around your eyes or relaxing your jaw. Like those are different inner resources that you can do that are in your container of safety. Also within your container of safety are those relationships or how you can relate to an interaction in that moment, right? Like what can you do in that interaction that will broadcast safety so you'll get more safety and connection back. So that would be another tool or not a relationship within the container of safety. And then a really important part is in the environment around you. So we know that subconsciously our nervous system is picking up all kinds of smells and sounds and random movements. And at the same time, we can put our attention on certain features in the environment that help us feel more calm and ease and connection, right? Like there might be, right now I'm looking out my window. And so I can look at just the light movement of the leaves on the tree. That's really reassuring to me. I love nature. I love trees. Or like in my environment here, I have two pictures that you can't see, but I can see of my daughters when they were both little, and they're so cute, and they're little. And so I can look right here and go, oh, they're so sweet. Right. So I can help create a container of safety, I can deliberately cultivate that container of safety through different resources, through different strategies, through ways of relating, and even imagery and attentional control. So all of those things are in my container of safety, and I can take that anywhere I go.
Yeah.
Really.
And I think that's the more resources, and that's, even in I've learned to cultivate more, the more the merrier when it comes to resources, because there's a lot of things. Sometimes there isn't a window. I have a window, but it's dark outside, but I love it. Blue sky regulates me, and I'm in London, so I really get excited when I see a blue sky. But having a resource to almost every situation, every location, things that would take few seconds versus things might take 5 or 10 minutes or so. But I think what I love about the play zone and your approach is taking that direction into what we, some people would call growth or post-traumatic growth, if you want to just bring into that, is that well-being, how I can make it easier really for myself to come back to regulation, because we will move through that, those states many times a day.
Yeah, I think you're bringing,
and that's the beauty of it as well. For me, is like it happens. It's not it's not a wrong thing that it happens or something. It does happen, and it's a normal way that we even communicate with that kind of curve of the different states that we have.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it isn't about, so I think it's helpful to also kind of clarify or to make a point that
yes,
not about constantly doing things or creating environments and spaces and continually just focused on not being anywhere other than in our play zone or in our safe zone. It's not about that. I want to be careful to not make it come across that that's what we're doing. It's not about that, because life is about the ebbs and the flows and the movement through a moment of feeling I'm in play and another moment of feeling like, I'm kind of tired. I sort of want to just relax, like, right? Or I really, really want to engage with someone, and you know what? I'd rather go stand in the corner. That's okay. So it's not about disconnecting from the normal ebbs and flows of our physiology, those normal shifts. It's not about that. It's about helping ourselves. It's really caring for how our body is responding and helping with compassion, which we've already said, and self-care to just sort of nurture those bodily responses, to really soften the edges, really, right? And so, and when we realize or recognize that we are really, really highly mobilized and in a fight or flight mode, right? Or we're really aggressive or really, really anxious, meeting the body there, and then helping, again, soften it, helping to find some calm. Or when we recognize that we're beginning to detach or shut down or completely check out or numb, then we can go, oh, okay, how might I help myself here to, again, get reconnected, re-engaged in life, instead of following that trajectory further and further down. So it's not about interrupting. It's not about bypassing. It's not about not meeting the body where it is or not feeling. It's about just having some inner resources and relationships and different strategies to help ourselves when we really, really need it. And then ultimately, the more that this has sort of evolved for me in my own life is it becomes even less and less about practices. Like that's, I think, where we start. We build these practices, we do these different things and all that. But then over time, it sort of morphs into just how we relate to ourselves, how we're relating to those shifts, in our physiology. And it's sort of just naturally, just that relationship in and of itself becomes the strategy. You follow? Like that becomes, oh, that's it. And that becomes enough.
And that's when it happens for me, that's like, oh, I do feel that's like, oh, this is such a, I'm so grateful to have done the work and learned about this. So when I'm feeling that I'm, I have an assignment or and something I need to do, and I'm noticing there is like, I'm spacing out, I'm not able to focus, instead of, hammering myself on it. I would, if I have the space of time and luxury of stepping out, I'll step out, I'll go and watch something, stupid on TV, just give myself that space of disconnecting. And more times than none, I find that it takes a very short time. It's almost like my physiology, my nervous system is saying, oh, so you've recognized where we are. So now let's go along with where you want to go.
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. Right. You actually met your body where it is, and you heard the body. And so now it goes, oh, you heard me. I'm actually okay. Let's go. Totally. Yeah, no, really.
And sometimes we don't have, I think the point that you're making is really, important to highlight, is that these practices, because we live in life, and whatever our role or in life, sometimes we don't have that. We have to override,
Sometimes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a really good point to make too. Sometimes we meet our body where it is, and we have to help do something anyway, while we know, and we can say, okay, I hear you, I get this. And at the same time, we do need to do this right now.
Yeah. And that's where the resources come.
That's right. And then we can come back to really recovering.
Yeah.
Sometimes for whatever the reason, whatever the conditions in the environment or the context or the situation or the interaction, for whatever reason, there isn't an opportunity to feel safe in that moment.
Yes.
So we might be in a fight mode, or we might be in a flight mode, or we might be even disconnecting. And once we get out of that environment, can we come back to enough felt sense of safety and connection to come back to recovery, come back to home?
It's I think one of the revelations, because I say it's a revelation because it's not that explicitly someone said that you have to be this one thing all the time, because and we give ourselves labels of different kinds of I always do this thing, this is what I always do, I'm focused person, and we expect that it happens 100% of the time. But I think the essence of the human experience is that it's changing all the time.
That's the essence, and that's actually the fun. That's the play.
Yeah.
That's the joy. That's the sadness. That's the right. That is the point. The everyday, every moment sameness would be boring.
Yes. Michael, I love when you're especially, we don't have the image now, but when you're speaking of athletes and people, athletes that we see performing and at high stakes for them. And I don't think it gets more stressful than when you have your career online for it, but you put it in a beautiful way that really, reflects the hierarchy of the nervous system, and how that there's a almost, the same kind of transition and flow that we move through. And from that, I see that it applies to everything. So do you have an example that you could explain that?
So what you're getting at is what I call the predictable pattern to pressure, right? It's a predictable pattern. And in the sports world, it's pressure.
Mhm.
They feel the pressure. And so what tends to happen, and we see it in almost most of the time, and I work with a college, a Division I college tennis program, and I work with that's a male tennis program.
Mhm.
And then I work with a Division I female volleyball program.
Mhm.
And when I ask each of them, sort of before you step onto the court, right, or as you're walking onto the court at the very beginning of the match, of the whole event, where would you put yourself in this predictable pattern? And the predictable pattern, the way I have it, is the play zone is at the top.
Mhm.
So the play zone is performance hierarchy. The play zone is when you're, like we were talking about, that's when you have a sense of calm and ease and safety and focus while you're engaged, while you're energized. And it's appropriately matching the situation, the context. And the way the player or the performer would feel is they feel more free. They feel freedom. They don't feel tight. They don't feel like they're overly thinking. They feel free and creative, and it becomes play. Okay, so that's at the top of the performance hierarchy. And then beneath that, I have the fight zone, where you're aggressive and you're just locked in, but you've got the game face on. You're totally tight jaw, eyes are tight, and you're focused, a lot of muscle tension, and you're just dialed in on making something happen.
Mhm.
And then beneath that, I have what I call the flight zone, right? So that would be where you're still mobilized, but it's very unsettled and it's scattered and it's more defensive and reactive. It's not going toward an intention. It's more or less, I'm going to defend, I'm going to react and hope you make a mistake.
Yeah.
Okay. And then beneath that, and so those are the mobilized zones. And then beneath that is a flavor of shutting down. And it might start with just feeling maybe discouraged or maybe confused. And then it will move into maybe just helpless, not really sure what to do. I don't have an answer. And then it could all the way go to complete collapse. It could be complete quitting, getting off the court, not wanting to play the game, could be even retiring. You can see that play out. You can see this predictable pattern. You can see it play out in a single game. You can see it play out in the match, or you can see it play out over a season, or you can see it play out over a career. You can see it, and it's very predictable. But so I interviewed all of these kids, right? So back to the male tennis program and the female volleyball program. And so I kind of asked each one of them, when they step onto the court, where would they put themselves in that hierarchy? And 95% of them step onto the court in flight.
Oh.
Highly anxious, really nervous, little unsettled, feeling highly evaluated, really, really afraid. Okay. So then you go, okay, well, what do you do? And some of them stay there and they just kind of wing it. And that's where they are.
Yeah.
The ones that are a little more successful, that quote, reach higher levels of performance, they channel that into anger and aggression and attacking. Yeah. So they go up. That's why I have fight slightly above flight, because there's some intention there. And so you'll see, and that's what, so when I ask all these players, some of them go, well, yeah, I get really aggressive. I'm just going to attack. Okay. And then you go, okay, so what happens? What happens when that doesn't work? I don't know. Sometimes I want to quit. Sometimes, I realize it's not my day. Like that's not my day. It's just, or they're just too good. Right. You'll even hear them say, like, they'll be doing that and the opponent will win the point and they'll just be like, oh, too good. So when those stories start coming, that's the beginning of that sort of moving into that immobilized. Yeah. Right. So the pattern is that they come out super anxious, they channel it into aggression. When aggression doesn't work, they quickly move into some flavor of shutting down. A lot of them intuit that that's not going to work. And so they fight again. And so they get stuck in this pattern of fighting and aggression and then wanting to quit, fighting and aggression, wanting to quit. And they're in this, right? And the ones that come out and are sort of in this, that middle zone of flight where they're just anxious and they don't have any resources. They just sort of play defense, and sometimes they'll win because the other player will start making mistakes, and then maybe they'll get a little more confidence, but it's just blind happenstance. It's just, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
So that is the pattern that we see it play out in almost everything. And so when I was watching this tennis player, that's what I was seeing. And that's what gave me the idea of putting these images into something that I could share with others, right? And you could see this predictable pattern, and you can move up and down this hierarchy, you can move left to right, but it's a pretty predictable pattern. And some people won't fight for very long. Some people won't ever go to fight. They'll just stay in anxious in that flight zone. Some people will only know how to play and fight. And as soon as it doesn't work, they go into some flavor of shutting down. So it's about really helping, just like we were talking about earlier, it's first kind of recognizing what's your pattern, where you tend to go. And then are there resources we can help you with, help to care for those bodily responses in those moments, in those situations, to maybe find your play zone. Maybe. Hopefully.
The play zone sounds a lot like what a lot of athletes, a lot of people say, which is it's the zone. It's where, I think that's the key to it. There's a relaxed, appropriately relaxed, let's put it this way, a feature of there's no unnecessarily muscle tension in the eyes, in the teeth, and it looks, from an observer, like they're just chilling, doing
it looks a little more effortless.
It looks effortless, and those are the top players. When you see, it's like, wow, feel like there's no one else beside them, not like I don't know how many thousand people watching.
I think so there's a couple things in there that you're saying. The play zone is a little, I have the play zone a little broader than the flow state. So the flow state, which is what you're describing, is like dead center in the play zone. But the play zone is a little broader. You don't have to be perfectly in the flow state to be in the play zone, because the play zone is a little more nuanced and there's a little more range. It doesn't mean you're totally at your best, but you're safe enough. You're metabolically efficient enough. Like what you were describing, when someone is completely in the zone, they are 100% metabolically efficient. And I'm saying the play zone is metabolically efficient, but it might not still be the most it's close. It's a range, it's a broader range, because I don't think you can always cultivate the flow state. I don't think you can always cultivate the play zone, but I think there's a lot more opportunity to cultivate the play zone. I think the flow state also requires the competition or the context of what you're engaged in to match near your upper threshold for what is your highest performance. To me, is whereas the play zone, you could be playing a much weaker opponent and still find your play zone. Whereas I think the flow state, you need to be playing, that has to be almost the two champions in the moment, both elevated to really get that. Or if you're engaged in something even by yourself, the stimulation and the actual act of engagement has to be at such a level that time is completely non-existent. Time slows up, you're completely free. But you also said something that was really important. In the play zone or in the flow state, it's not that the player or the performer is like, no one else is with me here. It looks that way. It's like, but what it really is the way I'm defining it is they feel so safe, so connected to their body, to whatever's happening, to whatever they're engaged in. And they feel such a sense, a felt knowing in their body of belonging in that moment, that it looks like they feel like no one else is even there. Because the truth is, they're not feeling evaluated. They're actually feeling, I belong here and everyone's with me. and the opponent or whatever they're going up against is providing that opportunity. They're no longer a threat. This is no longer in any way a threat. This is a gift. This is an opportunity to elevate. And it's not at all about evaluation. It's no longer questioning, am I good enough? Have I practiced enough? Do I have the skills? Do I know what I'm doing? That's not even on the table. At all.
It sounds so good, Michael, that it almost like I'll be there all the time.
Yeah, but we can't. But the thing is,
But yeah,
but we can get there, and
yes,
and we can have moments of that. And
absolutely,
but that's why the play zone to me is broader than just that. That is like the pinnacle of the play zone.
I when you were talking about the flow state, it also feels to me more, I'm feeling it, there's a little bit more inward than relational. It might not
maybe.
be.
Maybe.
It
Good
depends
point.
on what it is. There's a lot of, inward, but yeah, it's that relational piece that you also, and it's big part of being a human, is that, you talk about, the coach and the athlete, or, that, that connection, that supports, like teacher student. I wish would see that in teacher students, but that feeling of like, oh, they are co-regulating as well.
No, really good point. Way to bring that up. I think you're right. I think I would agree with you that the flow state might just be where it's just you're so locked into your own zone. And the play zone, you feel the connection, you feel the human connection, whether that's with your support team who's over there on the side watching you, whether that's even connection with your rival, your opponent, right? Whether that's connection with just life, with this opportunity, there's connection. To me, it's this, I'm kind of playing around with this new idea, and I'm writing a little paper on it, and it's about competition as co-regulation. And competition, the way we tend to think of it as, it's a battleground,
a fight zone.
It's a fight zone, right? And you got to get what's yours. Whereas what we're talking about and what you just articulated is, if competition can become an opportunity for co-regulation, what a wonderful thing. Now, that requires internally for the competitor. So if I'm competing against you and I want to actually find the co-regulation, I have to find in my own self this sense of safety, this sense of connection to me, connection to you, connection to this, and this mutual belonging here, this shared, we belong, right? And then that can turn into play, which is what competition as co-regulation is really play. The way Polyvagal Theory is defining it: social interaction with movement, ventral vagal with some sympathetic activation, with a very efficient vagal break that can allow us to ramp up and calm down with control, and keeping our social engagement system online. That's really the neurophysiological definition. And it's possible.
It's possible, but I think a lot of competitive sports will will not exist. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, you know what? So it's fascinating. So another quick little story. So with this volleyball program, I'm sitting here on Friday. So this just happened a couple of days ago. I'm sitting here with the two of the male assistant coaches. And so there's 3 men. Now I'm in my early 50s. They're in their mid to late 30s. And we're sitting here talking about, and one of them even said, this is their quote, like, how can we really build a culture grounded in trust and love? So there you have it, right? So this is this is college, this is Division I sports. There's a lot on the line here, and they're talking the language now. They're getting that, look, the more we can create a culture where they trust each other, They feel safe enough to make mistakes. They feel safe enough to show up in a vulnerable place. And they feel it's grounded in team love and support. That's pretty awesome. And that's competition, right? We saw it in an NFL game, that NFL game where the player was knocked out and in cardiac arrest. We saw how everyone kind of came together, you know, and that's what I was trying to point out in that presentation I gave, that Rafa Nadal and Roger Federer, two of the biggest rivals, beneath all of that is a tremendous felt sense of belonging together.
I have a friend who is an avid tennis, fan, and she kept posting all those things, and I got all goosebumps just watching it, and I don't know that history. I don't watch sports. I watch once every 4 years when the World Cup is happening. I do watch it, and this year it was just a different kind of a flavor because of, after being Polyvagal Informed and going on, your course, the Play Zone, it's a fascinating thing to watch. It's like, you see that play. And just before I forget, when you were talking about, trust and belonging, and these are when it happens in real life, we are affected by it when we see. That's what we call a good coach, like, giving that sense of, belonging and family. And I don't watch NFL, my husband does, so I know about the Chiefs and the player, but that we all rejoice in these moments of togetherness, belonging, and so we all like that. And we could still play competitive sports and have that.
Absolutely. Yeah, but for whatever reason, it hasn't been the culture. The culture is it's a battleground out there. You've got to be a warrior, and you've got to take what's yours, and all of that, no matter what. And if the others aren't with you, that's too bad. You need to do it, right? And that's so not what we're getting at. And I think that I think that worked only because of what we were talking about earlier. Most people are so mobilized in that flight zone when they step onto the field, that a way to help that is to let's all go fight together. That is absolutely more higher on the performance hierarchy, the way I define it, than, hey, let's all just run back and forth and play defense. So absolutely, let's fight is going to more than likely win over another team or another player who's just defending. So that's where it kind of grabbed its sort of foothold, because sometimes it works, and it's the same in business, or it's the same in all kinds of things. The person who is willing to fight and battle in the short term climbs the ladder, typically, right? But I would argue that it's not sustainable. It's metabolically really costly, doesn't feel very good while you're actually engaged in the process, and you're really close to your threshold for what you can handle. And over time, you're going to become sick.
Yeah, and that's why burnout, I think, it's one of the biggest things that happening. But it's from and in that culture, it's not just competitive sports. Everywhere where there's the forcing things to happen, getting all aggressive, otherwise you're labeled weak or not assertive or whatever, any of those labels. But again, if we sit back and see what we like, what resonates, at least to me, I don't know to all the people, but even in the game, when the game is I think players are playing in that play zone, if it's a competitive sport, there is a joy of watching that. There's absolutely I think this is a good game when both teams are engaged and playing, and there isn't that aggressiveness. So that's a beautiful thing to watch. So maybe we could just
yes and no. So I'm with you. I am totally with you. And
Yeah.
that's what I like to watch. I love to watch I love to watch players giving 100%,
Mhm.
completely engaged, and at the same time being super respectful and admiring the other players at the same time. However, I think that the reason we sort of align with different players or different teams is because they match where we are. So I would say that a lot of people will disagree with what you're saying because they're actually locked in their own mobilized fight zone when they're at an event, and they love the really aggressive, attacking, do anything to win team or player. That's what matches where they are in that moment. Whether or not they're living outside of that event in that state, I don't know. But in that moment, when they're a football fan, a lot of them are in their own fight zone, highly mobilized. So they're matching that team or that player. And that's where they are. You're saying you're watching something like that and you're in a state of play. And so you want to connect with that. And I do too. I don't get aggressive when I watch a sporting event. I don't watch certain things that are just pure aggression. That doesn't do anything for me. I don't want to purposely just get aggressive. But I think there are a lot of fans. I think what happens is we align with the player or the performer or the team that matches our physiological state in that experience.
Yeah, you touched on something, Michael, that is, I think, highlights how much our physiology, our autonomic nervous system, our states affects how we not only see the world, what we like, what we don't like, what we think we're choosing, what we enjoy doing or not enjoy doing. It has a lot of, I don't want to say dictates because that's not the right word. I can't find
biases. It biases.
It's biases,
It
absolutely.
sort of puts a valence over it. Absolutely.
Absolutely, of doing that. And it's but it happens with one nervous system at a time, like Deb.
Yes, changing one nervous system at a time. That's Deb Dana's beautiful sentence. It's a great one.
And I think it all starts with just noticing, and it's also what I've heard Dr. Porter say over and over, is respecting the physiology.
Yeah, recognizing and respecting. He also talks about honoring our bodily responses. Yeah, in my language, it's just meeting the body where it is.
Meeting the body
without evaluation, without judgment, just awareness. This is where my body is.
Yes.
And doing what we can to care for it. Yeah.
Yeah. I just looked at the time and I can't believe that it's been an hour.
That's good.
Yes.
We were in our play zone together. That was great. I love
absolutely that. Because I absolutely love your work, Michael. And it really brings a new lens to what the polyvagal is and what it can describe or simplify. To me, as much time that it took me to wrap my head around the polyvagal theory, I haven't read Dr. Porter's book.
Okay.
I just read the pocket book and all Deb Dana's work.
Yeah.
But to wrap my head around the theory, and how it took me quite a long time, because it's really a paradigm shift from where I was and how I saw the world. But now that I kind of get it, I would say, I don't want to say I got it. It's like it simplifies everything.
Yeah, totally.
It's, it doesn't personalize. If I am talking with someone and I feel like I'm a shutdown, or if I approach someone and they're in a shutdown, there's no longer that story of, oh, they're rude, or they don't like me, or they're putting all these labels.
Yeah, and that's really important.
Well, in an attempt to wrap up, let me ask you, what is your learning edge with PlayZone? As you
Yeah, the
are
learning edge with play zone is really, well,
into the
there's
world.
two things. There's two things right now. In the course that you went through, the certificate course. So the first edge there is really building our community. That's really important to me. And also I think it's really essential for us to build a really foundational community that we start. Not only, I think polyvagal theory has really obviously made a huge impact in trauma and healing and all of that. And I want to see that same impact in health and wellness, right? And so to me, that is not me, that's our community. So that's where I want to go with all of that, is let's really build that community, which you're a part of. And then the second thing for me is really teams. I've done a lot of individual, right? Individual coaches, individual athletes, individual executives, all of individuals, which ties into the community piece too, is teams get even more complex and more of that co-regulation, for better or for worse, and helping those who are really running teams is kind of my leading edge now. So like, I'm trying to get more engaged in these teams and the team dynamics and the coaches' involvement in the teams. So coaching the coach on their own regulation, how they find their own play zone, and then how to recognize that in all of the players or all of the components of the team. And then how do you not only enter into that and make and influence it, but also how do you make substitutions? How do you change? Like all that stuff is kind of where I'm going now, because it's taking all of this individual stuff and it's just rippling through, and it's a little more complicated, but also really interesting. So that's where I'm going, community and teams, and they're both the same, basically.
That's you answered the second question I had about how do you want to see PlayZone, evolve and move, and just as you're talking about teams, I don't think there's an answer. I wonder, really good coaches that we've, historically we know in sports. I wonder if we go and see their sort of blueprint, or what do they do?
Yeah.
I wonder how much of it would be, in a way, polyvagal.
Aligned. Yeah, I think a lot of it would. And I think a lot of them just intuit, right? They intuited what was the way to handle a person or way to handle a team. And I think we've seen those just emerge, those coaches emerge in all different types of disciplines. So yeah, I think they would. I think we'd look at it and go, oh yeah, that's it. Yes.
And that's, I think, for me, where polyvagal theory makes sense, because it is intuitive. It is, it's not something, and that's why I fell in love with it, and I want to do everything so everyone can get to know that it exists and see if it aligns with them. But it sort of gave me the blueprint of what is already happening. So it's not a kind of a forcing things to happen or shifting any of what I am doing. It's like someone has been following me all along and told me, okay, so this is how you do things. And by the way, all humans do the same thing.
That's right. No, exactly. That is the beauty of it, because it is. We've all experienced it. We've experienced those shifts. We've experienced moving through that predictable pattern to pressure. And it's the same whenever I speak to an athlete or a team. They recognize those images and they know exactly, they go here, when this happens, I do this. This is what they're very, very, when they see it, they go, oh yeah, I do that. That's exactly how I go. Yeah, they just never thought of it that way, right? Like they're not. So even just that alone, like beginning to look at how you're, like what we've really talked about, how your physiology is making these reflexive shifts and how that's biasing how you're seeing the world, how you're feeling about yourself, how you're interacting, the narratives you're making up, all of that, just those two pieces in and of itself can make a huge impact.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Michael,
You're
for this
welcome.
lovely conversation. I hope, everyone listening will go and read a little bit more and take the the play zone course, because I think it is phenomenal, and there's a lot in it, and it's for everyone. It's about how to live life.
It
Really.
is for everyone, and it
Absolutely.
become part of the community. That's the place for that where we're building the community.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, and my hope in doing these, conversations on the, on the polyvagal theory and being polyvagal informed is also in my attempt to bring it to the Arabic speaking community. And, hopefully with time we find, not only Arabic in all languages, because English is a privilege that, many people in the world don't have. So hopefully this starts to build on, and the communities gets built all over. So hopefully we'll see that happen. Thank you so much, Michael.
I'm happy to help and privileged to be a part of. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're awesome.